All right, welcome to the webinar. We've got some really exciting things. So again, happy Friday, everyone. We'll go into a contest. We're going to be giving out $500, and we got some great stories there. I think we're going to have Jim and Nick do some, I call it Dr. Filling. So we're going to kind of let you listen, share some of the stories, of course, anonymously that you've given us, and give some ideas what we've seen kind of reverse that kind of anti-culture or blame-filled culture, which is not something that really helps people do the right thing. So we're going to give it just a few more minutes to get everybody a chance to join, and then we'll get started. Now, Nick, I think you have a special assistant today. We're going to do a couple of demos, right?
I sure do.
Did he already ran away from you?
Yep, he's reliable at doing that. So this is Ash. He's our reliability expert here on the team. So he might be dropping in during the webinar today.
All right, nice. Jim, do you have any special guests hiding around you, or?
Well, mine's downstairs, so you may hear him. It's a 6.5 pound long-haired Chihuahua.
Yes, like it.
One of the most feared and aggressive dogs on the planet.
Yeah, seriously.
In their own mind, they are the most feared dogs on the planet.
It's funny. We also have an English bulldog, and he's 65 pounds, big muscular dude. And this guy, he's about 20 pounds, and he scares the crap out of the big dude. It's always the little dogs.
By the way, as we're ramping up to get started, if anybody also is a dog fan, feel free to share your favorite dog. My wife got us a King Charles Spaniel, so we have a small dog. I guess in the front yard, sometimes it thinks it's a big dog when other dogs are walking near the front yard. But
Yeah.
other than that, he's good. So again, we'll give it a few more minutes to get everybody started, and then we'll get rolling. So give us about 20, 30 more seconds, and then we'll get started. Michael, nice to see you. Thanks for joining. All right. So we'll do a slow roll in just a few minutes. All right. And we're going to go ahead and get started. And as people join, we'll dig in. We're going to do the intros first. So if you come in a little bit late, that's okay. You just hear us doing the intros. My name is Ken Gavranovic. I'm the COO of Blameless. Prior lives, I've worked with Jim over at New Relic. I've been at Cox. Back in the day, as a founder of a little company called web.com. So been in the space for a really, really long time. Really excited to have everybody today. We're going to talk about something that I think is really, really important around incident management, and in particular, that culture of a blameless environment, which is really critical because I think everybody's making an investment in incident management. You just might be doing it very efficiently. So we've got some great teams. I'm joined by Jim Gochee, our CEO, and Nick Mason, our principal solution architect. So we're going to have them join. Towards the end of this webinar, many of you have actually submitted stories of blame-filled cultures. So we're going to actually share, again, anonymously. We're not going to name and shame anybody. We're going to share some stories that you've given to us. And we're going to talk real, because we've been able to work with a lot of different companies. We're going to share what we've seen of kind of anti-patterns to fix that, to improve that culture, which is really important if you want to have a continuous learning organization. But with that, Sarah, maybe if you could just drop, we also have a great new Leo Labs case study. It's one of the things that's really interesting. We always say incident management really is something in all industries. You think about it, obviously we primarily work in people that build software, but that software does everything from, banking to insurance to ticketing, to HR, or like in Leo Labs case, they actually monitor space junk. So you think about it, you've got all these satellites out there. There's little small pieces flying at 22,000 miles per hour. So it's a really, really interesting case study. So Sarah, if you can share that, that would be great. So with that, let me introduce Jim, our CEO.
Hey everybody, Jim Gochee here. Excited to be talking about incident management, which is straight up in line with what we do here. We've had a lot of special topics in the last couple of months, but this is really, really close to home. And we're going to do a demo and take a look, but we're also going to talk a little bit about, things like budgets and why aren't people, investing more in this kind of technology. So it should be a good conversation. And again, welcome everybody.
Yeah, and Jim, often the value, I think that's the part is, people know they're making an incident management. A lot of times SREs know that they need to do something, but they don't know how to talk about it in business terms or kind of
Yeah.
the complexity.
Yeah.
But Nick, sorry, let me introduce yourself. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Nick.
no worries, Ken. No worries. Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. I'll be going through a short demo later and, sharing some of the experiences that I've had working with customers that, you may be in the situation where you're looking for a tool, you're in the process of, hey, how can I work on my incident management program as a whole? And I think this is going to be super educational, but also super fun, as Ken talked about the Dr. Philling, if you would, towards the end. We're going to share some really fun stories and talk about, and maybe we've even been through some of those in the past and how you could potentially go about those. So over to you, Ken. Excited to be here.
Sounds good. So Jim, I'm going to give you the first question. I think a lot of times, we often talk to SRE or people in the kind of DevOps group, depending on how companies organize. And often they're like, hey, I know we need to make an investment, but they just can't really give it the priority it deserves. Why is that happening?
Well, it's funny because I was in a leadership role at New Relic, and I remember my teams would always come to me asking to make investments in all kinds of stuff. And sometimes it was hard to sort of judge where to put investment. I think people intuitively understand that there's like two types of investments you end up making in reliability. I think everybody on this call can appreciate this. The first type of investment you make is a known and direct investment in your reliability. And it's really where you have, maybe full-time staff, maybe you have an SRE team, and you sort of just say like, I'm making an investment in reliability. But what's less understood, and I think this is why more companies don't take it more seriously, is less understood is the indirect investment you end up making basically with incident response and follow-up, all of those things that you didn't plan to do. Often that work is impacting well beyond the SRE team because there could be, fixing code or adding scaling or doing something. And a lot of those will go really over to the development team who's doing that reliability work. But that is an indirect investment, and it is often not understood what that investment level is. Sometimes we say that's a cost of doing business, but the truth is depending on how many incidents you're having and how effectively your team responds, your level of indirect investment can really vary. And we're trying to figure out ways to help people talk to their leadership team. And one of the things that we've been using recently is to think about it. It's like leaders know inherently they invest in an organization, and your leadership team will know how many people work for you. What your leadership team doesn't always know is what investment do they end up making in reliability that is this indirect investment, and that can be a pretty big dollar amount.
Yeah, no, so I think the takeaway, Jim, is like every company's actually investing in incident management. They just could be doing it incredibly inefficiently. So like the investment might be as people are swivel chairing between different systems. You've got the SRE team, that's probably already overburdened, spending 7 hours on an RCA and trying to bring everybody together. Now, if somebody does it right, what kind of savings, can they expect?
Well, incident response tools are not very expensive if you really think about what you can get from them. If you think about the cost of engineering time, if you think about the opportunity cost of not building on your roadmap, but maybe fixing issues that were of a reliability nature, think of the cost of repeat incidents where you never learn from them properly. So like say you're not doing proper retrospective. So if you basically invest more up front, it has a massive savings on the back end. And we're seeing, 10x and even greater return. And again, these are not expensive tools to help you, get on top of incident response. And so intuitively, that if we're going to save your teams enough time, you're going to hit that 10x return on your investment. And it's, Ken, it's not like it's a dollar savings, like, cloud, reducing your cloud hosting cost, but time is money. And when you can basically free your team up to do productive work versus the unproductive work of just dealing with the chaos and toil of an incident and the repeat nature, you realize how quickly all that can add up.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important. And I'll just throw this out there. If there's anybody out there, because I think in this environment, many times you have, you want a tool and it's like, okay, we're not buying any more tools. It needs to be the count of tools negative, or it needs to be cash flow accretive. And so I just want to throw this out for everybody. If it's something you're trying to navigate in your organization, we've got data that really shows that typically, if you do things right, you're going to save a minimum of about 5% of your engineer's salary. So if you think about, I've got 100 engineers, their average salary is X. Take that times 5%. If you do it right, that's the kind of ROI. Now, that's a savings, right, in time. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's great, but my boss isn't going to approve a budget for savings in time. They want dollars and cents. I just want to throw that out. It's pretty easy to translate a savings in time into dollar and cents, because you could have like a backfill that you can pull back a month, because these solutions, like even Blameless's solution, it's not 100. I mean, depending if you're a big organization, certainly we have much larger customers that spend considerable amounts of money. But if you're just getting into it, it's not a huge investment. And so it might just be, hey, maybe we've got somebody that left, we could wait 2 months, and you can turn that time savings into cash very, very quickly.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not, no one's gonna lay people off to pay
And
for
not a layoff for
tools.
sure. I'm just like slow down a backfill.
But on the flip side, everybody's looking to do more with less, right? So, if you're in a software development organization, you still have a roadmap and you still have work that you want to be doing that can assist with revenue generating, so if your product is the software and you sell that, there's always lots of work to be done on that. And as budgets have gotten tight, teams have been flat, teams have also experienced layoffs. So if you're in an organization that experienced a layoff, you're being asked to do more with essentially less, right? And so that's where tools and efficiency kick in. And I think intuitively we all know this. One of the other things, Ken, that I've been talking to people about lately is how AI has a role to play, because people know that AI makes everybody more efficient and effective, because AI is just like, it's showing up everywhere and people are benefiting from it. And, so a lot of times I'll say it's like our core platform, is also an efficiency play. And in addition, we also have AI in our platform. So if you're looking for a vehicle to have AI impact your business when it comes to reliability, we are this vehicle to get AI plugged into a reliability framework for your whole company to use, right? Yeah. And so people are like, oh, okay, this is how I can get AI brought in to assist with this part of, in a very important part of the business, right? I mean, you do need to build new features, but you also have to operate the system and make sure your existing stuff is working for customers. That often is the business for people.
Now, those are good points, Jim, because I think about going back to that time saving. Let's just do that 5%. Is we think about it, when you have an engineer's time, companies get an ROI on our engineer, the software that we build. So what's the value of getting 5% more capacity to build that next great feature or whatever it might be? Nick, anything to add on that?
Yeah, this whole concept of ROI, I think, is really interesting, because me as an SE, I'm on the front lines talking with prospects that may be in your shoes today, thinking about, hey, do I want to invest in a tool like this? And I think obviously some of the items that Jim and Ken are talking about are critical components, but when you're buying a tool, you also want to make sure that whatever process you're implementing or whatever automation or AI systems that you're using is actually working continuously for the team, right? So one of the other things that I would highly recommend you thinking about is, as you're doing this research and implementation, find a tool that lets you see how well your process is actually benefiting the team, in terms of, hey, do I have the right automation in place? Do I have the right rules in check? Are the right people being involved? Because I've seen, especially in my past, I've worked at an automation company before Blameless, and broken process leads to broken automation, right? If you're constantly coming in and tweaking and iterating the tool that you're using to help with this process, you're going to see even more continued ROI down the line. So that's one of the big things that I've seen also, Ken.
Makes sense. So Nick, how can a company achieve, I think what I hear people are looking for is consistent, efficient, optimized incident management.
Yep.
And oftentimes they have to be budget neutral or even budget accretive to be able to even have that conversation internally.
Sure. I mean, I think first it starts by leveraging the right technology and automating workflows to minimize the actual manual intervention that you're doing in this process, right? You think about whatever you make, we're talking about incident management, right? You have tools like PagerDuty or OpsGenie, Datadog, you're using chat tools like Slack or Microsoft Teams, Google Chat. There's a lot of disparate data systems, and having something, when properly integrated together into one system of record, can considerably cut down your response time, which leads to, reducing the amount of cost that it's taking anytime that you have an incident.
Makes sense. Now, obviously, we'd love for you to do business with Blameless, but we always try to do these webinars where it's not an advertisement. Because, I've been many times where I've talked to vendors, prior lives, I've had $250 million budgets to buy systems, and so we really want to make this about hopefully so that help you and, that you can pass forward. But let's dive in, Nick, into some of the technical considerations. If someone's thinking about doing something incident management, what should they start off with? Maybe integrations?
Yeah, I mean, I think integrations is definitely the backbone when you're thinking about effective incident management, but it's really not, about the quantity of the integrations that you have. One thing that I always like to do when I start a new engagement with a prospect who's thinking about traveling down this road is talking about the quality of the process that they're trying to implement, right? So understanding where they are today and where they'd like to be, giving recommendations on how we've seen similar customers travel down that path. And, regardless of what tool they end up doing, there's a lot of things that you should be thinking about besides integrations that now that I'm finding a dedicated tool, do I actually need to continue doing that same process? Can I optimize in some area? Can I maybe make sure that we can spend our high value resources in a more efficient area, like solving the problem, rather than doing just that manual busy work? So I think it's a combination of not only integrations, Ken, but also just optimizing and the quality of, understanding what you're actually trying to accomplish.
Gotcha. So teams, you've got tools, you maybe have got ServiceNow, you've got all these different things, but they're not connected in a way to do incident management. So they need to connect it. And I know at times we've talked to customers who are like, hey, I want to go fast, but the company uses ServiceNow, and so I've got to create a problem record. So the other part is you want to look whenever you're evaluating whatever's the right solution for you. It's not just the volume of integrations and does somebody check the box? Do they work with the tools I have? But it's also kind of the depth of implementation with those tools. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think this is a critical point in thinking about how do I want to optimize my process, because I'll give you an example. I was actually just talking with a prospect yesterday, and we were talking about what they're doing, why we're having a conversation. They said that they actually have 9 different tools as part of their incident management process today, right? 9 tools. And at any given time, wherever you are starting an incident, communicating something, there's different data in all of these different tools. So the main problem that they're trying to accomplish is, how do I have consistency and have everything be talking to each other? So no matter where I am, we're sharing the same information. My first question was, why do you need 9 tools, right? Just because you have 9 tools doesn't necessarily mean you need 9 tools, right? So we start talking about what you're trying to accomplish. How are you, what are your goals? What does your success criteria look like? We start talking about, some best practices. And it's like, well, the goal is to have everything be driven through Microsoft Teams. We're really just using these other tools as a way of kind of piecing things together. So it's like, that's where you talk about the quality, or kind of in your technical implementation, don't necessarily think about how can I exactly take what I have today, but think about how can I restructure or optimize what I want to do tomorrow. That's definitely one of the big suggestions that I have.
All right, so let's start to dig in. Nick, I'd love for you to do a demo in a second, but before we do that, Jim, I know you always talk about, like, I want to meet my engineering teams where they're at. And I think they first start with collaboration tools. What are your thoughts on like the collaboration tools and that we need to be supported, with customers?
Yeah, I mean, look, while Nick is right, and I think you should be open to the process you use. More or less, your team is already got a way they want to do things. And so what's really important is that the incident response tool fit into that. You know, if you're using Jira to track your tickets, okay, we're going to keep using Jira. If you put your retrospectives in Google Docs, okay, you put your retros up in Google Docs. And really what Blameless is, it's a very, you know, sophisticated facilitator and connector, so that it really, you know, it's like you don't have to be in all these other tools. And typically, like, you know, Nick said, like you can just be in your messaging tool, you can be in Slack, you can be in Microsoft Teams, and all of the other things are happening behind the scenes through automation.
Right.
And that automation is really powerful because it's not just a time savings, but it's also a like, oh shoot, I got to go log back into Jira, and now all of a sudden Jira just told me I have to change my password because we hit the 6-month password reset limit. I'm in the middle of an incident or something. You know, or just think about even just officially declaring an incident. Like if your customer support team is the customer, you know, sends in a note and it's like, hey, you know, you're down, and you're a customer support person, you're like, I don't even know how to get an incident started. Super simple to do that, again, from Slack or Microsoft Teams. Nevertheless, again, you know, there's going to be a Zoom bridge, there's going to be Jira tickets, you know, there's going to be workflow that you need to support.
Yeah, Jim, you made a lot of good points, and what I'd like to do right now is actually just get my screen shared, walk through a couple different things that you talked about here. But one of the big things that resonated to me when you were talking is, like, if you think about one of the biggest challenges that I've heard from customers is they don't want their team to have to, maybe they even have that defined process today that you were talking about, Jim. They don't want the team to have to sit there and think about what process do I need to follow when something is on fire, right? It's already a really stressful situation. All you really know is what's happening. And all you need to do is really declare that something is happening and have a system that is able to then take the information that you've given it and say, hey, this is exactly what needs to happen. Let me go and take care of that so that you can start taking a look at whatever you think might be the way to solve this problem. So, I mean, it's very easy, you know, the way that a lot of our customers do this is start wherever you're seeing the problem, whether that be, you know, automated alerts coming in, or maybe you want to come into Slack, Teams, or Google Chat, something along those lines, and start an incident. No matter what you are doing here, all you have to do is just say what your problem is, define what type of workflow or process that you're currently wanting to execute. All I need to know is that customers are impacted, they're blocked. I give a short description, and then you let the tool go ahead and take care of everything that you would need to think about beforehand. So I don't need to create a Slack channel. We're doing that for you. I don't need to create a Jira ticket. We're doing that for you. A Teams bridge is created. A PagerDuty alert is sent out. Maybe I'm pulling some information from Datadog so that we have more information from logs, right? I'm communicating out to the right parties. We're putting the right set of tasks in the incident so that the team knows exactly what they're responsible for once they actually come into the incident. I think having this structure and peace of mind that, hey, I already need to go figure out something that I don't necessarily know exactly what's going on. Having that structure in place definitely puts a lot less pressure on the engineers to focus on actually doing what they were hired to do, rather than following a process that someone put into place because we need to take care of this stuff in a certain way.
So Nick, maybe you could just dig into what are the essential functionalities of an incident management platform that someone should look through?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so what I just demonstrated there was, I always kind of refer to that as the reactive way of starting incidents, right? I experienced it. I'm sure everybody here on this call has experienced it. Maybe you have some sort of alerts coming into your communication tool. You see something's happening, or maybe you even just experience like something is wrong yourself and you need to come in and you declare an incident. That's exactly what I just did. But I also think, you know, to your point, Ken, having automated alerts for kind of critical components of the services or products that you're managing that may need to automatically start incidents and gather the right people and notify the right stakeholders is a critical component. I also think that, again, having some sort of structure, like I mentioned, to, hey, you know, we're having an issue with our API and anytime our API service is impacted, I need to go and bring in this team, and they need to follow these series of steps. And based off of what they're doing in their triage, have a tool that can adjust with them. I think having that flexibility and structure at the same time is super important, because it allows the team to really just, the way that even we're talking today right now, it's like we're just having a conversation, we're adding information, we're adding what we think is important. It's just like an incident, right? Hey, I found out that all of a sudden this region around the world is impacted, or this many customers are impacted. There might be a different workflow on the back end, but the team doesn't need to know that. The tool's going to help them actually understand what they need to do when that certain situation comes up, as well as who they need to do it with, who needs to be notified, and all the other components that you really need to have in your head. We call that tribal knowledge, right? That's like the biggest challenge, is if that person leaves and they're the sole person that knew how to do that, all of a sudden you're screwed, right? So I think that's definitely a component. The other big area that I'm a huge advocate for is learning from every incident, right? We talked a little bit about retrospectives and postmortems before we started. And, think about all of the information that happens in an incident channel, or when you're troubleshooting a problem, right? I'm just scrolling here, and a lot of incidents, they go on for days and days and days or hours, right? And there's back and forth hundreds of thousands of messages in a channel. And being able to actually, extract key pieces of information and understand, areas that you can improve on is a critical area. I talked about process related improvements earlier, but also, technical areas. Are we seeing challenges in a certain area? Are we seeing trends? Maybe these are repeat incidents that are tied to a specific component of our product. Being able to capture all of that information and bubble it up into graphs that you can share with leadership or internal or even external stakeholders is definitely a critical component of having a tool like this.
Yeah, and Nick, what about security considerations? Because I think these days, if you think about, even if there's two industries, Jim, I think that are doing great, but Nick left to talk about security in particular, but it's security and AI. But let's talk about security first. What are some of the security considerations? Because a lot of times when you're troubleshooting, you could have PII data. Maybe you've got other types of things, related to, a particular jurisdiction. Talk a little bit about what kind of security considerations someone should think about.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the biggest things that I see, so, one of the things, and we're going to touch on this a little bit later with the whole not blameless culture, what are some, not blameless stories that we've heard in the past. But I think having that idea of a blameless culture where anybody can come in and raise a problem if they think it's a problem and then route to the right team is important. But at the same time, depending on what's actually happening, you need to make sure that you have a system in place where you can, minimize the exposure or make sure the right people are involved. So, for example, being able to create private incident channels within Slack, or if you have a repository of all your incidents in a tool like Blameless, just because Travis over in sales has access to Blameless to come in and take a look at his incidents doesn't mean that he should have access to level 3 security incidents where there's PII data and everything has been exposed, right? So having that role-based access control, not only within your chat tool, but also within the repository in which you're holding those records is, I think, super critical.
Yeah.
Anything to add there, Jim?
Yeah, well, yeah, in addition to, just access control within the tool, there's of course making sure the tool that you pick is fully vetted,
Yep.
does adhere to industry standards. And in the case of Blameless, we went through the extra steps of keeping all data completely segregated between our customers. Some of our customers have very sensitive data needs, and it's too easy to make mistakes when data is commingled in the same database. So we go through great lengths to make sure that our underlying platform is also very secure. We've passed many security reviews from some of the biggest companies around the globe. And that's an important consideration. You don't want to pick a vendor, particularly a vendor who maybe hasn't been in the market very long. You don't want to give them access. If you think about it, you're giving access to the keys to the castle when you have API keys that are, accessing your ticketing system like Jira or ServiceNow. You're giving them access to all this information in Slack, which some of it, like Ken said, can be very sensitive. You want to make sure you use a vendor that you can trust.
Makes sense. All right, Nick, a little bit of fun stuff. Everybody's talking about AI. What's AI's role in incident management?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the, some of you may have seen a previous webinar that I was in. This is one of the things that really gets me excited because, I was guilty of this beforehand too. And some of you listening to what I'm about to say are probably thinking, oh yeah, I do that too, right? So one of the, I think, first and foremost challenges in incident management is, hey, let's just say, I started an incident and we've been at it for 30 minutes and we're going back and forth. We think we know what we're doing. We're not quite sure yet. We're not quite there yet. I paid you in because you're our subject matter expert, right? And just, take this incident channel as an example. We're simulating hundreds of conversations back and forth. What's the first thing that you're going to do when you enter into this channel?
You're going to say, what's going on? Who's doing what? What happened?
Exactly. Or what you're going to do is you're going to start reading the channel, right? Both of these are extremely inefficient, right? I'm guilty of this. I start a problem, in previous lights, I say, hey, something's wrong, go fix it. And then I go into 3 1-hour back-to-back calls with prospects. And then I come back and everything is resolved. And I say, what the heck happened? I pull an engineer into a call and I ask them, hey, how did you fix this? What was the problem? All this stuff, right? What's that's doing? It's taking time out of solving the problem. It's taking time out of them doing something else, or it's taking time for you to actually be efficient. You were brought in because we know that you can help. It takes you 10 minutes to go read the channel. It's taking you 10 minutes longer to solve that problem. So I think one of the first components with AI is being able to actually summarize and take information from this chat, all the information that we've gathered, and come in and actually get some sort of update, right? So what we did here is we took all of the information, our chats, our tags, our comments, all of the data that we've been talking about, just like we do in a chat channel, like Slack or Teams. And what we've done here is we've summarized it. And this summary includes a lot of different components that may be important for different stakeholders, right? So for example, as a sales engineer, I probably want to get, a 1-sentence description of what's going on, as well as a deeper information, a little bit more detailed of an information, as well as maybe what impacted user capabilities are happening so I can relay this to my customers, right? But for you, Ken, and you, Jim, you probably just want to know, like, where are we at this, right? Has this been resolved? Are customers impacted anymore? What was the problem? So that, if this was a critical incident, you can go and, communicate to leadership from our customers or something along those lines. So I think that having this is super helpful. It takes me 2 seconds. Well, not literally 2 seconds, but you get the picture, right? I can come in here. I could read this really easily. At the same time, though, think about this. We just talked about getting different pieces of information in different ways, right? So if I really wanted to, let's just say, Ken, you wanted to get information, but you didn't want it to be quite as technical as the way that this was written, right? What I can come in here too is I could utilize another feature that we have called the comms assistant, where I can come in and say, /blameless create comms, and I can say, hey, let me take this message that I just summarized, and based off of what persona, Ken's an executive, right? He wants to just get very lightweight information, minimal technical jargon, cut the wordiness so that he can understand exactly what's happening here, right? So I can come in here and define various personas with different pieces of information that they're looking for. So for example, the executive message here. And what we're actually doing is we're utilizing AI in order to rephrase this in a more user-friendly way for Ken's persona. So you can come in here and you can see, hey, Microsoft Teams.blameless.io platform experiences significant shutdown and unresponsiveness, as well as an error message indicating a failure in retrieving integrations, right? It then talks a little bit about what service was impacted. All Ken needs to do is read through this very easily now. And hey, look, I even know that my executive channel needs to get this notification. So AI is already coming in and saying, hey, I know how Ken wants to talk. I know how you're talking, Nick, but everybody's speaking the same language, right? Without having to type it in your own terms. And that's one of the other challenges. Like, some of the other engineers on the call here, Jim, our CEO, he hops into an incident channel. What's the first thing you're doing? Oh crap, I better button this up because Jim is watching me, right? I shouldn't have to sit there and think about how do I want to word this message to Jim for 5 minutes. I should just type exactly the way I would type, let the AI restructure it in a way that Jim would understand, and send it off, continue to solve the problem. So these are just a couple of things that we're currently working on. Some other stuff in the near future, Ken, which I'm super excited about, but we'll table that for another day.
Yeah, great. If you want to stop sharing for a second, Nick,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And so if you ever want to have like a detailed view, you could just go to Blameless, click demo, talk to the team, and we'll actually talk through what you're currently doing, what we see other people doing, and share best practices. For example, many companies now have automated Slack channels for executives, so that executives aren't even going to the problem channel. They just know they can go to the executive channel and get those nice, clean English updates. Same thing for sales. It really makes everybody a lot more efficient. Well, let's go into the next portion of today's webinar, if that's okay, Jim. I think this is going to be fun. We're doing a nice contest. We've got the top 3 I'm going to read out, and we're going to go into the contest, and we're going to be giving away $500 at the end of this. So these are not messages that Jim made up or I made up. These are messages that came straight from you, maybe some of you on the call. So we're going to go ahead and read them, and then we'll talk through them. So I'm just going to go to the first one. Here's what we got. At a previous job during a critical deployment, a junior engineer accidentally deleted a crucial database table while trying to clean up some old data. Instead of immediately owning up to the mistake, they panicked and tried to cover it up. This led to a significant delay in identifying the issue, causing hours of downtime for our product and impacting customers' trust. The blame game ensued, with the team pointing fingers at each other rather than focus on resolving the issue efficiently. This lack of transparency and accountability not only prolonged the downtime, but also damaged team morale and trust. It took weeks to rebuild the teamwork and trust that were lost in the aftermath of this incident. So, Jim, when you see these type of behaviors, like, and sometimes this really does come from CEO on down, right? It's not just CIO or CTO. Like, how do you fix that?
Yeah, well, and I think we have wonderful Victor on the webinar. So welcome and thanks for joining us. I feel like this is a very classic story, and I think it's kind of human nature to try to hide mistakes, cover things up, and I think it's human nature because we're trained that when we make a mistake, something bad's going to happen to us. So you really have to undo that training. You have to unwind that natural tendency of people, and the only way to do it is to just think about like reprogramming people to learn that it's okay when a mistake happens, to acknowledge it. It doesn't mean that it's not recognized, like, okay, that was a mistake. So we're not saying you didn't make a mistake. We're saying you made a mistake. Let's talk about now how to make sure that doesn't happen again. So there's an owning up to a thing. I did a bad thing, and then I see that I don't get criticized, and in fact, then like it's productive. Like, let's talk about how we don't ever have this happen again. But that has to be repeated when people are making mistakes. Like, you have to be in those environments where people are making mistakes and let them know that the mistake is a mistake. Now let's talk about how we're going to fix it. And then, during the retrospective, you do dig into it. It's not like you pretend like the mistake didn't happen, but you dig into it with the spirit of preventing it from happening again. And so again, retraining has to occur there.
Makes sense. And if I could just add, I remember like a real life story. I won't mention, again, we're not naming, even if it's our own experiences. So I was the executive, and I remember it was a big consumer-based site that sold cars. And I got a call that that there was a mistake or there was an error, and I came up to the floor, wherever it was. And basically all of the images for the listings of all the cars were now the same. Not good. But it was great is, somebody came right up to me, hey, listen, I was making a live production change on production database with SQL, and I forgot a where clause and reset that. Now, I could have spent a bunch of time, but I said, hey, that's great. I appreciate you telling me, and we worked through and we got the issue fixed. But then I went to okay, well, there's a reason, like, why were they making production databases? And it turned out that the backend admin page hadn't been invested in. And so there was changes that was coming through customer support that weren't being, there's no way to fix it except to literally go into the production database. And that's just setting up that employee to fail. And if you have a continuous learning, like in that case, we learned from it and we actually added the features and functionality to allow them to do that without getting into the production database, as well as partnering with them to think about if they ever did have to make a change, a different process where there's more than one person involved. So all right, let's go to the next one. I was once hired in a certain software firm. I had to work overtime for about 2 months trying to complete the final testing of a new software release for the firm's flagship product, which is then to be used by thousands of organizations worldwide. Unfortunately, the software had many bugs and testing had taken several weeks longer than expected. One afternoon, my boss stopped by and asked me to sign off on the completion of the portion of testing. He explained the project had gone over budget, was in danger of missing the committed release date for customers. When I objected because I felt that the software is still buggy, he says not to worry, whatever bugs remain will be fixed in the next release of the software. I felt so disappointed. I tried to express my concerns to the boss, but he never bought it. I couldn't cope with the company anymore, and I finally decided to quit. Well, that's sad because that's a great example of somebody that cared about the quality of work they're doing.
Yeah.
And was kind of just, but Jim, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's an anti-pattern for sure. If you're feeling pressured that, have it's like, okay, everything's great when it's really not. You're probably working in an environment where you're not really free to speak up. You don't feel comfortable. There's no real trust. Maybe this is like very, very similar to the negative culture of blame, but it's the culture of like, I'm going to ignore you and pretend like something is not the case. And it really it's like affects morale negatively. Similarly to blame-filled cultures, you're going to impact employee morale when this happens. And why do you hire someone to do something if at the end of the day you're not really going to listen to them? I mean, they're going to go work somewhere else, and that's exactly what happened in this case.
Makes sense. So Jim, I've got another one, but before I do that, we've got one from Elliot, a Q&A. I just want to go back. He's good because I think it's a little bit earlier. Please, for clarification, is there any incentive compensation for participation? If you've made a submission, then yes, there is an incentive because you've got the ability to win, which we're going to announce in just a moment. The last one, I was part of a marketing team for a new product launch. One day, my team was presenting our marketing ideas to the CEO, who was not satisfied with the results. The CEO started criticizing each team member on their performance, pointing out errors that were particularly attributed to me. The CEO then announced that I was responsible for the failure of the product launch. Following the incident, my reputation deteriorated with the team, leaving a lasting impact on my self-esteem and confidence. Most of a pretty heavy one. My relationship with the CEO became strained as well. And then ultimately, kind of productivity went down. That's a tough one, Jim.
Well, if your CEO is the problem in your blame-filled culture, you probably need to find another job. It does start at the top. Like a lot of things culturally, an example gets set by leadership. So maybe it's not the CEO, maybe it's the head of a department, so maybe head of marketing is also doing that. But a lot of people will describe this as, what it feels like to work in a toxic environment, and it's non-productive. And, I would say in this day and age where people have options, why would you choose to work for a company that's going to treat you like that? Now, again, maybe there were problems with the launch. And maybe, there were things to learn from it. That's not really the point. The point is you learn through investigation and looking at mistakes. You don't learn through blaming. To say it's your fault, I think when you hear words like criticize, it implies you're not actually really trying to learn from it. It just implies you're trying to blame. And there's a way to take a look at what happened and decompose and dissect it. There's a way to look at that where the outcome is I've learned and I'm not going to make that mistake again, versus the outcome is I just made a bunch of people feel bad for no reason. Like, did we learn from it? So I criticized you. Did anybody learn anything? Probably not. Probably people just are like, okay, I'm going to learn to keep my head down and like try to ride under, fly under the radar for a while. So again, that's how I would look at that. Would look at that one.
I totally agree. And when you're in those cultures, I've oftentimes have done transformation. You'll talk to people, and that's where, everybody knows what's broken, but no one's doing anything about it because there's no continuous learning going on. All right, with that, let's go ahead and give our $500 away. So when we think about these three really tough stories, Jim, what do you think from your perspective, is kind of like the, we'll call it of the three, the worst case scenario of a blame-filled culture?
Um, well, I like the technology one because I think, for me, it resonates with like, okay, an engineer made a mistake. You do see this happen quite a bit. And and really this is exactly kind of where the key learnings can come in. Like you said, you've also witnessed like, okay, how did this technology mistake happen? And can we put something else in place? So my vote goes to that one.
The first one, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And I'm with you. That's where I was at. Nick, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going with that one as well. I've experienced something, not personally doing it, but experienced a very similar situation at a previous company where we were building what we called digital employees. And we built this very bespoke employee out for a key demo. Someone had gone in there right before it and was playing around with it. Turns out they deleted the entire thing. So I hop on a call a couple hours later, I go to run this thing and nothing's happening, right? And, essentially it turns out that the person was scared to tell me because they thought that people were going to get upset, they were going to get fired or something like that. But, having that transparency and communication, if you are able to learn from it and understand, what happened, how can we fix that in the future? Maybe, Aaron, our marketing guy, he's always saying, never do operations solo, right? Always do it in a pair. Maybe we could have looked it over as a pair and, tighten things up before we went into that demo. There's always an opportunity to learn. And if your culture is coming in and saying, hey, you're thinking that you can't share what's happening, obviously the culture is wrong because if you had a good environment of where it's blamelessness rather than blame, you'd feel okay actually telling somebody that actually happened.
Makes sense. So we'll reach out to the winner and get you that Amazon gift certificate. We really appreciate you sharing the story. We're going to go into lightning round. Some of you actually sent questions ahead of time, so I'll go through those, but we're also monitoring the chat. So if you've got any live questions that you want to throw out there, we'll take them right now and give you our thoughts, what we've seen with other companies right away. I'm going to go into the first one that someone sent us. Jim, what's the impact of incident management on customer satisfaction? And you don't have to take that, and it's open to you, Nick, if anybody wants to take it, but that's one of the first questions we got is what's the impact of incident management? All right.
Yeah, I'll take it. I mean, if I think we can all appreciate this because we use services ourselves, all of us do. And, when those services are having issues, it impacts whatever you're trying to get done in that moment. And it's not like it just is an annoyance. Sometimes you really need to do something and you just can't do it because a tool is having an issue. And so, people pay money for these things and they expect them to work. And when things don't work well, it does have a huge impact on customer satisfaction, happiness, and ultimately, if it gets bad enough, revenue, right? We've seen customers who have told us they have seen a measurable decrease in churn once they started to get on top of their incident problem. And they used us to help them get on top of it. And they measured less churn as a result. So it can have a direct impact.
All right. What training do teams need to use to have to kind of maximize the use of like incident management? Anybody want to take that?
I have probably like a supplement to it. So why don't you go first, Jim, and then I'll kind of talk about what I've seen work well.
Ideally, there's not a lot of training, but when you roll new things out, you do need to have people go through at least some kind of onboarding process. Oftentimes when you roll out a tool, you're actually streamlining a number of things, so it's going to get better. And that's a great opportunity to basically communicate, what are we up to? Why are we doing it? Here's how the tools work. Here's how we use them.
Mhm.
And maybe there's even like a little bit of like a roadmap. Hey, we're going to start and we're going to use this part of the tool, so let's train on that today, and then later on we're going to do another thing. But that, thinking of it as a rollout and training and really as like a project, a deployment project, is the right way to do it, because you need to get usually like a large group of responders and anyone else that they tend to work with, like customer support or whatever. You need to get them on the same page, so you kind of have to think about it in a structured way just to bring everybody along when you roll these things out.
Yeah, and one of the cool parts about my role is obviously I talk with prospects all the time, but I'm pretty actively involved in onboarding. I have my entire career. And one of the things that I've seen be particularly useful, like to your point, Jim, it's like you're onboarding a new tool. There may be a ton of stakeholders that may be using it. It's going to be really challenging to train every single person individually and get them comfortable. But, for example, like a tool like Blameless, we're automating communications during an incident, for visibility. But I've also challenged people to think about those automated communications to also help with learning the tool to its full advantage, right? So like as you start an incident or as you're doing something, give maybe a hint on what they should be doing next, or if they're trying to accomplish something, how do I actually execute that in the tool that I'm using? And naturally, over time, what I've seen is that you'll start to get more comfortable with it, and then you can go in and you could just flip those helps off when the team now feels comfortable and you're starting to actually see that benefit from the tool that you're using. So food for thought. I've seen it work very well for a lot of customers in the past.
Great. Sarah, if you could do me a favor, I got a note on a direct channel that somebody wanted to have like a demo link. So I think we've got one of those. If you could put that in the Slack and the chat channel for everybody. Jim, I think we've got time for one more question. How do we foster a culture that prioritizes effective incident management?
We've been asked this question before. I love this question. Often you can tell by the nature of it, it's maybe somebody who, doesn't control the culture. And you may find yourself working in an environment where you're thinking to yourself, I understand the importance of all this. Why does no one else understand the importance of all this, right? And what I've encouraged people to do is, find and build support for it, and just start talking to people and like, hey, do you think what we're doing is not optimal? Do you think we could do a better job? Do you think there's a real problem here? And I don't just talk to immediate people. So like, talk to customer support reps, talk to customer support leaders, be like, hey, from your perspective, how are we doing? And I can tell you that they often feel the pain from customers, because usually a customer will contact customer support when there's an incident. And so you can build up some internal organizational momentum, and then you can start to basically have more people who are like, yeah, hey, we need to do a better job here, this is a problem. And yeah, like we have a system, but like it's just not working very well. And Bob doesn't think so because of these reasons, and I don't think so because of these reasons, whatever. And you can just sort of get a lot of buzz going. And typically when problems are talked about, then eventually leaders will address problems. And you need them to sort of get buy-in to have this cultural shift, because they need to invest in incident management, they need to invest in reliability overall. And so, but often they need help understanding that this is an important thing to invest in. So if you see it from within the organizational view that you have, you need to start building, kind of some organizational momentum through other people who could be on your side, also be advocating for it. Eventually it picks up speed, and then there you go. A leader is going to be willing to invest in it.
Makes sense. We're going to wrap up. I'm pretty excited. I want to kind of do a preview. So appreciate everybody's time. We'll reach out to the winner on the contest. Appreciate all the great submissions. We're also going to have a really neat guest coming up. We'll stay tuned for some details on that. We've got MyFitnessPal that's going to join us and talk about their journey with incident management and how they've really changed that. And for those of us, like, I think that's an app that probably a big portion of this population has. Like, I have it, collaborate with friends, and we kind of share our progress. So we're going to have a really nice webinar. You'll hear straight from one of our customers, MyFitnessPal, on how they're using incident management, what it's done to kind of change their organization. So that's going to be great. Going to be really exciting. So Nick, Jim, thanks so much. Jim, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I mean, this has been great. Again, we've done a number of webinars. We have a whole series. Stay tuned. There's more that we do. And, you know, we're always open for questions during these. And we're always, I mean, honestly, open for questions at any time. You can find Ken and I and Nick on LinkedIn. We are very passionate about this. We love it. We believe in it. And, you know, you're not on this webinar unless you also love it and believe in it and are passionate about it. So we love talking about this stuff. We love seeing people make advancements, and you know, we're here to support this community of people who are trying to make a difference.
Definitely. And I answered a couple questions in the Q&A section, and some fantastic questions. If you guys want to chat more, or if you want to continue into some of those conversations, we're out of time here. Feel free to book a demo. I'll be on that call. So if you're enjoying that conversation, feel free to meet me on a Zoom call, and we'll continue that conversation and see what we can talk about. Those are always my favorite parts of the engagement, is brainstorming and talking about stories and what we've seen work. So looking forward to seeing you over there, and thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day and happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Take care.
Take care.